We've all been there, staring at our bookshelves and not finding a single thing we want to read, picking up book after book and never settling into a single one. Today, I am here to give you 8 tips for how to break a reading slump. Hello book friends, I'm Jen and welcome back to my reading life, and welcome to a video that has been requested by a few subscribers to my channel, and that is, how do I get out of a reading slump? I think most of us have probably been there at one time or another. Maybe it was very short-lived, maybe it was very long-lived, but I think we've always found ourselves at moments as a reader where we can't settle into a book, or we just find ourselves not really in the mood to read. And what is a bookworm to do in these scenarios? Well, I'm here to give you 8 tips to help you work through a reading slump. And then stay tuned to the end of the video. I am also sharing 5 books that helped me personally get out of reading slumps in my reading life. And while those books may not work specifically for you, maybe they will give you some ideas as to the types of books that might. So grab yourself a cuppa and settle in while we chat about reading slumps. Tip number 1 for getting out of a reading slump, and perhaps the most obvious tip of all, is to take a break from reading. There is nothing that says you always have to be reading a book or looking for your next book to read. Sometimes it's okay to just not be reading, to take a break, to set all the books aside, clear your mind, and just focus on other things in your life. There are lots of reasons for a reading slump. It could be added stressors in your personal life. It could be some change that is occurring. Lots of different reasons for reading slumps. And sometimes the best way to deal with that is to just not read. That is my first tip. Tip number 2 is a bit of an extension of tip number 1, and that is to lean into other hobbies. So take a break from reading and find some other things that give you joy, whether that is hobbies that you do with your hands, like needlework, embroidery, cross stitch, knitting, crochet, whether that's working on puzzles or learning a new recipe or baking, getting out in your yard and gardening. There are lots of things you could do. Maybe focusing on some new form of exercise you want to take up. Maybe starting to take walks in nature and just enjoy the environment that you live in. Maybe it's deep cleaning your house. It could be anything really, but maybe find something else to focus on to take the pressure off of feeling the need to pick up a book. Now, if you're saying, Jen, but I don't want to not be reading, I want to be reading, I just can't figure out what to read, then tip number 3 is for you, and that is to make a list of what's not working for you in the books that you've been picking up. So look at the books that you've tried to read that you can't seem to get into and take a look at the different aspects of the book. That could be pacing, that could be whether it's plot or character driven. That could be the writing style. So again, this could be that the book is written in a very lyrical writing style. Maybe it's high literary fiction. Maybe it's something too genre specific and that's not working for you. So sometimes taking a look at the writing style or even the format of how you are reading, whether you're reading physical books or ebooks or listening to audiobooks, perhaps trying a different format to the way you are reading might shake things up for you just enough to get you back into the reading groove. Tip number 4 is actually 2 ends of a spectrum, and that is to try either a very plot-driven book or try something very deep and immersive. Again, those are opposite ends of the spectrum. So for a plot-driven book, that might be something that's very pacey. It has short chapters. It's got really plot-driven storyline to it. So it's less about what the characters are and what their inner life is like and more about the action of the story. On the flip side of that, maybe what you need is something really immersive. So that could be a really chunky novel that's epic and sweeping in its story. And that could get you back into the reading groove because you can get deeply immersed in the characters, in their lives, and what's happening in a story that is really sort of big and almost larger than life. So again, those two opposite ends of the spectrum might be a way to get you out of the reading slump, especially if you pick one end or the other that's different from what you've been currently trying to read. Tip number 5 is to try reading something that is very plot driven, kind of like what I mentioned in the prior tip, or something in a unique format. I sometimes find that when you pick up a book that's written in a format that is different from just your standard prose novel, that can be a way to kind of reinvigorate your reading life. So whether you pick up, say, a novel in verse, or that could even be that if you tend to read one specific type of book, so say you're mostly a fiction reader, pick up a nonfiction book, maybe one that has lots of pictures in it, or sort of is broken up into just kind of interesting facts and bits of information. So it's not written in your standard format. It could be an epistolary novel or something along those lines. There are lots of really interesting formats for books these days. There can be books written in sort of pictograph form. You could read a graphic novel. All of those are excellent ways to shake things up and maybe get the spark back in your reading life. And again, back to that plot-driven, fast-paced novel. So you want something, and I'm going to just use an example of a book I think many people know, like The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. That is a book that is propulsive, it is plot-driven, it is going to just whip you through the book. The chapters are short and something along those lines. And again, you can apply that to any genre you like to read. This is just an example of a book I think people know and are familiar with. So find something, whether you like to read mysteries, romance, science fiction, even if it's historical fiction, literary fiction, whatever it is, nonfiction. So find a plot-driven novel and dive into that and see if that grabs your attention. And speaking of genres, my next tip, tip number 6, is to pick a genre-specific book. And that can be either a genre that you always gravitate towards, or maybe even a genre that's new to you that you've been wanting to try out. Because sometimes what we need to do is shake up the status quo a little bit. So whether that is mysteries, science fiction, fantasy, romance, whatever your genre or subgenre or type of book of choice is, gravitate towards that. Or on the flip side, if you've been thinking to yourself, you know, I've always wanted to try a cozy fantasy book, maybe now is the time to give that a read, because maybe just that little bit of something new and fresh is what will get you excited to be reading again. Tip number 7 may sound strange coming from someone like myself who creates bookish content, but tip number 7 is that you should maybe consider taking a break from consuming book-related content online. I know this has been something that I have struggled with in the past, and that is when I am consuming a lot of information online about books. Sometimes I get this sense of anxiety or fear of missing out, or sense that I need to be reading all the time. I'm never going to be able to read all the books I want to read in my lifetime. And everybody keeps talking about amazing books and I want to read all of them right now. If that is kind of bringing up your stress level and making you feel like reading is something you should be doing and not something that you're doing for the pure joy of reading, then maybe you need to take a step back and stop consuming less bookish content online just for a period of time while you work through your reading slump. And yes, that even includes watching my videos. You can take a break from them anytime you need. I know I get lots and lots of comments from people saying how much I have added books to their own personal TBRs, and I know that sometimes that can start to feel overwhelming. So if that is a piece of what is affecting your reading slump, then I think it's okay to say, you know what? For the next week, for the next month, for the next 3 months, I am going to either cold turkey, not watch any bookish content or consume any bookish content, or I'm going to set very extreme limits on how much content I consume. And you'll have to decide for yourself how much content that actually translates to. And then my final tip for breaking a reading slump, tip number 8, is to reread a favorite. And hear me out on this, because even if you aren't a rereader, I think sometimes going back to a book that you know you love, that you are 100% sure you love and that you would love to read again, can be the thing that gets you out of your reading slump and reminds you of the joy of books, of the joy of immersing yourself in a story and with characters that you have just fallen in love with. So really think hard about those books you absolutely love and pick one of those. And maybe that needs to be in conjunction with a plot-driven book or a really immersive read or a very genre-specific book. So maybe you want to pick a mystery by a favorite author that you've already read because you know that is a tried and true way for you to get stuck in a book and not want to get out. And I think that's really what we want to get to push you out of the reading slump. I have to say, this is the one thing I wish I had learned much earlier in my life because I think it could have prevented other reading slumps that I got into before I started rereading. But since I have begun rereading, that has been a really great way for me to break a reading slump or the start of a reading slump just by revisiting a tried and true favorite. I hope these tips were helpful, whether you're in a reading slump currently, or if you just want to save this video or make note of all of these reading tips and save them for the future when you might need them. And I thought in addition to just giving you these 8 tips that I would also share with you a few books that have helped me personally get out of reading slumps at different times in my reading life. And while these books specifically may not help you, I'm going to relate them back to some of the reading tips that I gave you so you can kind of see real life examples of what these books were, how they related to the reading tip, and how they helped me to get out of a reading slump. The first book I want to share is one that actually crosses over a few different tips that I just shared. And that book is The Unexpected Mrs. Polifax by Dorothy Gilman. So this book is plot driven, it has short chapters, it is genre specific, and this is exactly the book I needed at the moment that I picked it up. It was quite unexpected to me how much I loved this book. And while the character of Mrs. Polifax is a huge reason why I loved this book, the pacing and the plot and the writing style were just exactly what I needed at the moment that I picked this book up. And I found myself in a world that was just a breath of fresh air. And I think sometimes that's what you need to help you break through that reading slump feeling. But this book, if you have something that makes you feel the way I just described myself feeling when I read this book, that's the book that you should pick up. Or if something is intriguing you in that same way, then try that book to help you get out of your reading slump. Next up, I have actually 2 books because they both fall into the unique format that I talked about in tip number 5. So I wanted to give you a couple of examples of what I meant by that. And the first book that really was such a surprise to me and is such a fun format of a book was LMNOP by Mark Dunn. And this book follows the residents on the island nation of Nollup, and Nollup is named after Nevin Nollup, who created the phrase that uses every letter of the alphabet, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog." And they have a statue to Nevin Nollup on the island, and suddenly the letters of "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog" start falling off of the statue. And the island council decides that when a letter falls off of the statue, they can no longer use that letter. And so they may not speak that letter, they may not write that letter. And what is unique about the book is that as the letters fall off of the statue, Mark Dunn stops using those letters in the writing of the book. So by the end of the book, you are left with very few letters of the alphabet, as you can see here. And while you would think that would make for challenging reading, you actually adjust to it as the book goes along, and it becomes quite easy to follow along, even though you're missing so many letters of the alphabet. But I just found this pure delight. This is a gem of a book that I think is completely overlooked, and it just reinvigorated my reading life when I read it. I just absolutely fell in love with it, and it was just the perfect book at the perfect moment in time. Along those same lines is a book that I just read this past January for Epistolary January, and that is Thursdays Till 9. Whoops, that's upside down. Nope. Now it's upside down. There we go. Thursdays Till 9 by Jane Trahey. And this is epistolary, but it is written in very unique format. Let me show you a page. So it has all kinds of things in it, from memos, and in this we have like a loan application form. There are telegrams. There's all kinds of things. It is set in an office of a department store, so like, you know, the back offices of this retail store in Texas, and we're following our main character who has just gotten a job there, and sort of all the office politics that are going on. And this was just so refreshing. And I think sometimes that's exactly what you need. And a lot of that had to do with the format this was written in. It was very light. It was very humorous. So consider some of those things when you are thinking about what kind of book you want to pick up next. Do you want something that's going to make you laugh? Do you want something that's going to make you cry? Because sometimes you need that cathartic cry when you read. What is it that you really are in need of in the book that you're picking up at any moment in time? And try to find something along those lines. The next book I'm going to share with you is a favorite of mine. It is my very favorite book by my very favorite author. It is the book I have reread the most over my life, and it never fails to make me feel good and to get me reading again, and that is Happy All the Time by Laurie Colwin. So if you have a book that you just adore, to the point where like I almost hesitate to recommend this book to people because I don't want to hear that people don't love it as much as I do. And I know there are people who don't. Laurie Colwin's writing style is very unique and specific, and you either love it or you don't. I personally happen to love it, and this book in particular, but if you have a book that you feel that way about, that might be the book you need to pick up and dive back into, because I think sometimes the comfort and the familiarity and the joy that you get out of a favorite book is just what you'll need to pull you out of your reading slump and remind you why you love reading in the first place. And the last book I'm going to share with you as one that got me out of a reading slump, and actually this is a trilogy, and the whole trilogy just kept me engaged over one summer. This is sort of the opposite of most of the books that I've already shared as books that have gotten me out of reading slumps, as this one falls into that very sort of immersive, epic, sweeping saga kind of a book. And that is The Chadwick Family Chronicles by Marcia Willett. This is the first book in the trilogy, Looking Forward. And Marcia Willett is very similar to Rosamund Pilcher. So if you enjoy Rosamund Pilcher, you might want to give Marcia Willett a try. And this trilogy in particular of Marcia Willetts is just fantastic. It is a family saga, and you follow these characters over a long period of time throughout the 3 novels, and it is just a book you can really, as I said, get stuck into. If you want to get stuck in a book, you're looking for something immersive, if you enjoy family sagas, I can't recommend this one enough. It is absolutely fabulous, and I think it makes a perfect book to pick up if that is something you're drawn to and you think that might help you get out of a reading slump. You know what? Even if you're not in a reading slump, any of these books that I recommended, they would make for a great read. I may be biased, but there you have it. And those are my 8 tips for breaking a reading slump, along with some books that have helped me personally get out of reading slumps. I would love to chat with you down in the comments. Have you experienced a reading slump? Are you going through a reading slump right now? Did any of these tips strike you as something that might work for you if and when you experience a reading slump? I actually think these tips will work even if you're not in a reading slump, but maybe you're just having trouble deciding what to read next. I think you could walk through some of these tips, especially the ones specifically about the types of books you might want to pick up, and maybe that could help you hone in a little bit on what you're in the mood for. So if you're just not quite sure what you want to read next, and maybe question, do I want plot driven? Do I want character driven? Do I want a genre specific book? Should I break out of my rut and try something new? Or do I want to lean into things I know I love, like rereading a favorite, or even just maybe reading a book by a favorite author that you know is somebody who always draws you in? Just some of these I think are good to keep in mind anytime when you just aren't quite sure what you want to read next. And I'd also love to know in the comments, what are some tips that you have that help you personally get out of reading slump if there are things that I did not mention in my tips I gave you today. I think there are lots of ways to help you get out of a reading slump. These are just my personal tips. So let us share tips so that everyone can benefit from the knowledge of all of our book-loving reading slump experience. And if you're here, but you don't have anything you'd like to add in the comments, but you'd like to let me know that you were here, because comments really do help my channel, why don't we put something that's fast in the comments? A fast emoji, a fast car, a train, an airplane, a rocket, I don't know, anything you can think of that moves fast. Put those emojis in the comment, because like I said, sometimes what you really need is a fast-paced, plot-driven book to get you through a reading slump. Share all those emojis in the comments. I love seeing those and knowing that you were here. And if you enjoyed this video, if this was helpful to you at all, I would love it if you would hit that like button. And if you're on the YouTube mobile app, you can also hit the hype button as well. Both of those things really do help my channel. And if you're new here and you'd like to see more videos like this or different videos than this about books and other bookish things and the reading life in general, then I would love it if you would hit that subscribe button and join my cozy bookish community. Thank you all, as always, for being here and taking time out of your day to spend it with me in my cozy corner of booktube. I thank you and appreciate all of your lovely comments and all of your support. And as always, I'll be back with another video very soon. And until then, I wish you a good book and a warm cuppa. Bye.